Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today we have Ryan Bourne, CEO and co-founder of Cloud Campaign. Today's title is Agencies, the Next Frontier, and our tagline is Marketing Tech is ripe for disruption, and marketing agencies are bringing a macro shift to the agency. Ryan, our guest, is the CEO and co-founder of Cloud Campaign. Cloud Campaign is building the operating system for marketing agencies and helping agency owners with running marketing campaigns, growing their book of business, and monetizing their clients. Thanks for joining us on the show, Ryan.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me, David.
So you're one of the younger people we've had on this show. How'd you get started, or how'd you know you wanted to make this jump from being an employee to being, I guess, an employer or an entrepreneur at a relatively early age of your life?
Yeah, first I'll take that as a compliment, so thank you. I think I was exposed to entrepreneurship pretty early on. Both my parents are entrepreneurial and
Hmm.
they have their own small businesses. So like my dad owns a painting business where they, paint residential and commercial
Hmm.
buildings. My mom's a real estate broker. And so I think that was always a path that was in the back of my mind of, hey, maybe I can run my own business one day. After college, went and worked at a really small startup, 14 employees.
Hmm.
We were based in the Bay Area, building cloud security, and that also then got me thinking a bit more and started snowballing different ideas of, hey, like this actually seems pretty tenable to go and start my own company. The founders of this company, sure, they're very smart, but they're normal people like you and I. I think when you think about Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos, it's really hard to make that connection of how do I, as a at the time 24-year-old, end up being like Jeff Bezos? Like it just
Hmm.
doesn't happen, right? And but seeing the founders of this 14-person startup that did really well, we ended up exiting. That was more attainable, and that was really what gave me the confidence to be like, okay, I think I can do this. I think I can start my own company and employ others.
Is this your first business, or was there an earlier stage of your life where call it like as a kid you had like a lemonade stand, or as like a teenager you did like I don't know some like online market? Like is this your first shot into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I'd say this is the first real go at it. There's been small side projects that I've started in the past that were never successful, but this is the first thing that's really had traction and paying customers.
So how'd you come up with the idea? Have you run a marketing agency? Like how'd you know their pain points? Like how'd you know what they would want in a platform?
It was a pretty windy road, honestly. So when I first started the company, I wasn't actually going after marketing agencies. I was going directly after brands and enterprises.
Hmm.
And through those conversations, trying to sell the enterprises, realized that a majority of them actually work with agencies. And there's been this macro shift happening over the past decade where more and more brands are starting to work with these kind of smaller, boutique, localized agencies that are very specialized. And
Hmm.
that was the light bulb moment for me of, hey, if I just sell an agency, now I get 30 brands that come onto the platform, and these are
Hmm.
pretty large brands. And so that's really when I made that pivot, probably 9 months into starting the company.
How many conversations did you have to have with enterprises before you hit that aha moment?
It was pretty quick, honestly. I had conversations with small business owners first, trying to sell restaurants, honestly. I just thought
Hmm.
maybe this is a good niche that this would be useful for. Let me try and sell restaurant owners. And that was extremely painful. I don't know if anyone has tried selling restaurant owners, they're impossible to get a hold of. They're always busy. They never want to like try anything new in terms of like software products. So that was a lot of dead ends. And then I was like, hey, I have this connection that works it into it. So like TurboTax, for example, is
Hmm.
one of their products. And really quickly on in that conversation, it was a no-brainer. It's like, okay, agencies are an underserved market. Most of the players in the space are going directly after the brands. But despite that, the agency is the one that's making the decision. A majority of brands, like 80% of SMBs in the US, use an agency or a freelancer. And so that was a pretty obvious kind of light bulb moment for me where I'm like, all right, let's stop what we're doing. Let's rebuild the product for agencies and like let's hit the ground running before someone else figures this out.
So you said that was roughly 9 months into your journey, right?
Yep.
So when you in that first 9 months, how'd you know what you wanted to build, or did you do it off of like gut intuition?
It was really gut intuition. I think that was a big mistake that I actually made. It was one of the larger mistakes I made during this process of starting the company
Hmm.
and running the company was not talking to customers and just thinking they're not going to understand until the product's built and I can like have
Hmm.
something demonstrable and show them what I'm building. So I didn't really start customer conversations until I had an MVP in market, and that took about 3 months, and then from 3 months to 9 months, so those 6 months, I'm just trying to force this product onto people that no one wants.
Hmm.
Um, So I think I just started conversations way too late, and I was kind of just building in the dark.
So what were the features in the MVP versus the features that people wanted at call it the 9 month and beyond mark?
Yeah, so
Like how different were the two?
The MVP was really focused on dynamic marketing. So it was this idea that existed in email marketing, but not in social media management, where you could trigger content based off the weather, right?
I
So
see.
if it's sunny where I'm at in Boulder, Colorado, maybe I would see shorts and a t-shirt in my email for like an e-commerce store.
I
Versus
see.
if it's raining where you're at, you're going to get like a jacket and pants in your email. And so this was like a concept that already existed in email marketing. My thought was I can build this for social media management, so you can do kind of the same idea on social, which is really why I started with restaurants, because I was like, hey, if it's a nice sunny day in San Francisco, like you're going to want to go sit out in the patio and
Mm,
drink beer versus if it's like a cold rainy day, maybe you want to advertise like a soup and coffee or
mm,
something, right? That was the idea, and that is very, very different from what the product is today. So back then it was really focused on like how do we do dynamic marketing, how do we make it seem like actually not automated by having things that are very topical and relevant. Now it's focused on how do we make agencies more efficient, right? Like if you're the agency owner, all you really care about is how do I bring on more clients with my same
mhm.
team so I can make more money and ultimately get more money to my bottom line and have more profit at the end of the day. And so when we think about the product today, it's really focused on can we streamline a lot of like the inefficiencies of social media management? Can we automate a lot of the tasks that are pretty tedious and like not fun for an account manager at an agency?
How do you find these agencies to market to them?
Right now, most of our customers are coming from inbound. So we're advertising on Facebook and Instagram. An agency sees our
Mm.
ad. They then respond to it saying, hey, I want a demo, run them through a demo, either one-on-one or a group demo, depending on how big they are. And they'll typically sign up right after that.
So you find that generally paid ads are a pretty good way to scale?
It is, which is kind of interesting because I think most folks try Facebook ads and then say, nope, didn't work. Like I spent a couple $1,000s and I didn't get any returns. Facebook ads doesn't work. We had a similar journey where we tried Facebook ads for about 6 months, trying all sorts
Mhm.
of different things, and most things didn't work. And then we eventually found a couple of campaigns that worked, and since then we've kind of continued to expand that to be more and more campaigns that are similar and like using similar carrots to drive conversions. But yeah, most of our customers, honestly, probably 90 to 95% of our customers during a given month come from paid advertising.
I see. What would you say is the success factor behind the new version of the campaign that made it work versus the original version? Because I do hear more stories about failed Facebook ads compared to successful Facebook ads.
Yeah, hopefully none of our competitors are listening right now, but what's really worked for us is focusing on that carrot, right? Like what's the incentive that you can offer to a prospect that's going to make it so compelling that they have to click on the ad and give you their
Hmm,
information. And so for us, it's white labeling, right? So
I
we
see.
offer a white labeled version of our product where the agency can have all their branding on it, all their colors, their logo, it can be on their own domain if they want, and they can ultimately tell their client, "Hey, I built this," if they want to, and they can charge
Mhm.
more money for it. And so that's the carrot that we use in our advertising is, hey, go through a free demo and we'll give you free white labeling when you sign up. And it's just really compelling for agency owners because it's something that traditionally we would charge $400
Hmm.
setup for.
Are you afraid that white labeling will reduce like the virality factor of your application? Because when people go to one of your clients, I guess landing pages or like I guess campaigns, they won't know that you're affiliated with it.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, it's definitely a double-edged sword because it really does help with client acquisition. It makes
Hmm.
the agency a lot happier with the product. It makes it stickier as well, right? Like if you're the agency owner,
Right,
you
right.
say, "Hey, I built this product," and then the next day you switch to Hootsuite, and they're like, "Hey, why did you switch off that product that you just built? Like this doesn't make
Hmm.
any sense to me." So like it helps a lot in that sense, but it is difficult because it doesn't lend itself to virality, right? Like the client doesn't know what product the agency is using.
Hmm.
And so the client's not going to go, if they end that contract with the agency and go to the next agency and be like, hey, you need to use Cloud Campaign. That's what we had at my last
Right,
agency.
right, right.
That doesn't happen. But what does happen is turnover is pretty high in the agency space. And so account managers frequently have maybe 1 to 2 tenure at an agency, and then they'll go and move on to a different agency. And so that's one thing that we have seen is the account manager frequently will bring the tool with them. So when they go to the new agency, they say, hey, like, let's get off Hootsuite, let's get off Sprout Social, Cloud Campaign. It's been way easier to use and made me more efficient. Like, can we please use this?
Do you know why that is? Specifically, why it is that the turnover is so high? That's pretty fast.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. It doesn't seem sustainable, you know?
Right.
Yeah, I wish I had more insights on that, but I
Okay.
don't know.
So you took an idea, you launched it. 3 months later, you got feedback on it. You 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 collected more feedback over the next 6 months, and then around the 9 month mark, you had a clear idea of who the target was. Is that correct?
Exactly.
And from that 9 month mark, how long was it after hearing all this feedback that you realized, or that you were able to build the MVP for the new audience?
Fortunately, a lot of the code was reusable. So kind of the core platform stayed the same, and it was just a matter of how do we add on these additional modules that agencies need. Kind of the core, I'd say like the three core features that we had to build out at that point were multi-brand management, right? So like the difference between a brand and an agency is the agency is managing a lot of brands,
Hmm.
sometimes hundreds or if not thousands, and so they need kind of separate workspaces for each client within our tool. So that was the first step. Second one was reporting, right? It's always super important for the agency to be transparent and show their client where the money's going. And so building out reporting that was built in a way that allows the agency to easily share it. So like previously we had reporting, but it was all on the dashboard. It didn't
Hmm.
really work for the agency. And so now we have almost like Google Docs where it's like a tokenized link where you can choose who gets access to it and share it via this link. So the client doesn't even have to log in. They can just view the report. And then the last thing was client approvals. A lot of agencies or a lot of clients require that the agency send the content to them before it ever goes live on social media because they want to make sure it matches brand guidelines,
Hmm.
typos, that type of stuff. And so that was kind of the last feature that we had to build before we'd actually be a good solution for agencies.
So how long did that take? Like call it like a few months?
It's tough to say because it was pretty blended. Like
I
while we
see.
were building those features out, we were still selling the product. We were
Oh,
saying,
okay.
yeah, like this is coming really soon. You'll get pilot pricing, like we're giving discounts. Hey, give us feedback as we're building it. Like this is the time that we actually did it correct, where we were in very close communication with our ideal customer profile while we were building the product. Um, yeah, so I don't remember exactly. It was probably a few months until those core features got built out. But again, like we were selling product to agencies while we were building it.
So how'd you find your first, like how difficult was that first customer, like the first paying customer? And were they part of your ICP or were they like only like tangentially close?
They they were part of the ICP. Yeah, I mean, the first 10 customers, it was really kind of hand-to-hand combat. Like, it wasn't scalable, it wasn't reproducible. It was just, hey, can we get anyone paying anything for this product? That's the other thing is we were discounting it so heavily. It was like, hey, we'll give you 90% off if you just
Okay.
like try it out and give us feedback over the next few months.
Is that a
And
lifetime 90% off?
no, no, no,
Okay.
it was it was capped at I think like 3 to 6 months, depending on the size of the
Okay.
agency. Yeah. But even some people weren't open to that. Some people were like, no, I don't care. Like, I don't want to switch tools. Like, this thing isn't ready. I don't want to pay anything. I don't care if it's free. I'm not going to use it. Other people were like, okay, like, sure, yeah, I want to like leave my mark and help you build out this tool, so I'll do it. But anyways, like, long story short, we pretty much just did like cold outbound, where we would call
Okay.
agencies and say, hey, we have this blog, we'll write an article about you and tell the world about your agency and how you're better than everyone else and how you manage your clients. And we want you to try out our products. In exchange, we'll give you a discount. And that worked decently well for,
Hmm.
10 clients, but again, it wasn't really scalable.
So what about clients 11 through infinity?
Advertising, honestly. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, we, it took about like, I think like from when we realized, hey, we need to pivot to agencies to then actually getting the kind of advertising sales engine running, I think it took about 9 months. Um, so it took a while, but yeah, once we figured that one kind of carried out with the white labeling, the business changed overnight. We were honestly 2 months away from shutting down the business.
Hmm.
We only had like $2,000 in revenue and MRR, and we're like, hey, if we can't get to 10K by the end of the year, and this was in 2018, uh, this doesn't make sense. Like this is just like a losing business where I'm just losing money. Like my savings is dwindling. This isn't going to work out. So
Mm.
unfortunately, we're just going to have to call it quits unless we can get to 10K MRR. And then in October is when we figured out that ad and just like overnight had, I think at the time it was like $5 leads that were extremely qualified and interested in a demo. And we're just like, oh my gosh, okay, like let's just spend as much time as we can giving people demos and trying to onboard them until December so we can hit this 10K MRR benchmark.
So this is a time prior to you receiving any funding, is that correct?
Yeah, so we were fully bootstrapped until like summer of 2019, at which point we were kind of like break even. I think we're around like 15,000 MRR at that point.
And is this like you putting in your own money to pay for all these ads? Because ads aren't cheap and they usually take a long time to get the payback.
Yeah, I mean, we started with really small experiments. So like, yes, we were running ads for 9 months to try and figure things out, but we were doing like $200 experiments, right? Like it was
Okay.
very, very small amounts. Um, so yeah, it was my money, and my co-founder also put in money. So like collectively, we put in just under $30,000 of our savings. Um, but yeah, we kept it pretty lean and like really just focused on unit economics early on. Like, hey, what's our payback period? Can we acquire a customer for a cost that would allow us to get payback within 2 months? If so, then like we won't really have cash flow issues. And so we just kind of yeah stuck with that model and didn't really ever overextend ourselves so much that we would be at a point where we desperately needed funding. We always had, $5,000 to $10,000 in the bank, which thinking about that now is scary, just given how much. But at the time, like, we weren't really paying ourselves salaries. Like, there wasn't much overhead. Like, the only
Mm.
overhead was like server costs, and AWS, I think, gave us credits for 12 months or 24 months. So like, we were pretty scrappy in the early days.
Dang, that's an interesting time. I feel like I definitely hear you. Like I feel like in the very beginning, oh, $5,000, so much money in the business bank account, and over time it's like, shoot, we only have $5,000, we only have $10,000.
Oh
Like
yeah.
it's different once you have a payroll and you have like many staff. You're like, shoot, I can't. I feel afraid to ever let anyone not have their like I don't know rents covered or their like food covered or whatever.
It's a lot of pressure. I remember like mentally when that shift happened, when we hired our first employee, thinking this is real. Like someone's life is on the line now. Like
Hmm.
I can't mess around. Like I can't just be like, oh, it's fine. Like I'm gonna furlough my salary. Like my co-founder Ross will furlough his salary. This new employee can't furlough his salary. Like
Right, right,
he
right.
has to pay rent. So like we got to figure this out now.
Were you able to hit that 2 month target window of getting a payback on call it Facebook ad spend?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we were able to hit that, and that's kind of still where we're at today. Um,
That's pretty incredible. That's like the level where you just want to pour like all the money you can in the world on that fire.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's you obviously like have to think about churn as well, right? Like if you have a leaky
For sure.
bucket and you're
Yeah.
just pouring a ton of people on top of the funnel, but you're losing a sizable chunk of them out the back door. It's like, okay, let's first fix the bucket so it's not leaking, and then let's just pour fuel on the fire. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. Actually, is like beginning of this year, we had a war room and we're like, how do we get churn down? Churn is just notoriously high with SMBs. It's also
Yeah.
high with agencies and freelancers, and so like the combination of the two, we were at like our worst month ever was 10% gross revenue churn. We're like, this isn't sustainable. Like we can't just keep pouring money into acquisition if we can't retain them. And so we've been able to actually get that down to like around 3%, which has been really good for us. But yeah, we're now at the point of okay, retention's in a good spot, product's in a good spot. Like let's grow a lot quicker, and how do we focus on acquisition now?
So if you're paying, call it like $100 in ads, and you're getting $200 back over the course of 2 months, unless they churn within those first 2 months, you're technically net positive. Is that right?
Yeah, so we are pretty much net positive. The other interesting thing is like especially with freelancers, they typically come back later, so they'll churn
Hmm.
within the first like few months, and then 3 months later, 4 months later, they come back and become a customer again. And so I think what we realized is like the reason why churn is so high with agencies and freelancers is they lose their clients, right? Like
Yeah.
their clients are like, all right, I'm on a 3 month retainer, 3 months is over. And they're like, yeah, this is great, but like, I don't know, I'm not seeing the return. I'm gonna go try another agency. And
Mhm.
so the freelancer's like, oh, I just lost one of my three clients. Like I can't pay for this tool anymore.
Mhm.
I'm going to churn. And then a few months later, they end up coming back. So that's another thing that we're trying to factor into LTV, right? Because like at that point, it's not just RPU divided by CAC, or not
Right, right.
divided by churn, if they're actually coming back and like have kind of multiple subscriptions with us over the course of their lifetime.
You also get the brand awareness component when you have ads. Even if no one clicks them, they just get to see your brand more often. Over time, it has a slow but cumulative effect.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't know if we've really seen the benefit of that yet. Like, we
I
don't
see.
have too much organic growth at the moment, but it's something that's top of mind for us, especially with 2020 really impacting any sort of in-person events. It's been really hard to get out there in front of our target customer because traditionally we would go to trade shows and conferences where marketing agencies would be, and it was really easy to see, Cloud Campaign right next to Sprout Social. We're sitting at booths right next to each other because we both sponsor the conference, and like people build this association of like, oh wow, Cloud Campaign's like at the same level as Sprout Social.
Right, right, right.
Obviously, we're not. Sprout's doing like 180 million a year. We're nowhere near that, but still, like people make that association, and like it gives us a lot of validity and helps with brand awareness.
Are you were you given the choice, or do you intentionally choose to be right next to Sprout Social for that effect?
It wasn't actually Sprout. I'm just using them for reference. It was
Okay.
another player in the space, but um, we sort of did. We chose to be next to a larger player that's more designed for brands, and yeah, like it's honestly just really helpful because an agency talks to someone like Sprout Social who charges based off users or social accounts, and they go, "Hey, I have 30 clients I'm working with. How much is it going to cost?" And Sprout's like, "Oh, it's going to be $3,000, whatever it is." And then they
It's
talk about
expensive.
it's super expensive, yeah. Like people don't realize, but it adds up really quickly if you're an agency, just because it's not the pricing model is not really built for agencies. It's built for individual brands, and so those different pricing levers don't really work for agencies. And that's why it's super beneficial for us because they'll come talk to us and say, "How much do you charge?" And we go, "Oh, it's $25 per client that you manage." They're like, "Oh, it's a no-brainer. My clients pay me 500 bucks a month, 1,000 bucks a month. Like
Mhm.
all I have to do is pay you $25. Cool. Yeah, here you go.
Right, right. So I read your end of 2020 recap in terms of your business. Do you feel like a lot of that growth? I think you like roughly tripled your revenue in the span of a year. Is
Yeah,
that growth, do you think, a function of internal changes within your business, or more so external factors like COVID accelerating digital adoption, or
I think
both?
both. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely both. Like, if you look at the start of 2020, we were 3 employees.
Hmm.
I guess there were four of us. We hired Becca in December. Yeah, there were four of us. So, like, we were a really small, scrappy team. And then we started to kind of build these specialized roles and build up the team. We're now at 13 for reference. And so I think that was a big part of it, is just having like these different folks helping out in very specialized roles where all day all they're doing is selling the product or marketing the product or building the product, whatever it might be. Versus previously, obviously, when you're a founder, it's like, hey, I'm wearing 20 different hats, so I'm going to work on the product for an hour, then I'm going to try and market it for an hour, then I'm going to try and sell it for 2 hours, and it just doesn't really work that well. So that was certainly part of it, part of the growth that we had. Um, COVID was honestly a tailwind for us as well. Like we weren't sure what to expect
Hmm.
when COVID first hit in like February. Like we saw it pretty early. We actually had sizable churn. A lot of our customers pulled back their spending, and they said, like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen. My
Hmm.
clients are really scared. A lot of agencies that we work with restaurants and like small mom and pop brick and mortar stores, and so they put everything on hold with the agency. The agency then like kind of canceled a lot of their software, put the software on hold. Um, yeah, and so we just kind of like bunkered down. We're like, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, let's pull back ad spend. Let's
Hmm.
change our hiring plans a little bit, so hire a bit slower. And then what we started to see is, hey, like folks are not spending as much money on advertising on social media and other places, but there's been just this massive need for brands that traditionally were never on digital to go digital, right? Like if you think about the restaurant, for example, like maybe they never had a social media account because they didn't need it. It didn't really matter. Like the same customers would walk down the street and they'd see the restaurant, they'd walk in the door, and it was all just foot traffic.
Hmm.
Now that that's not possible because you can't actually go in the restaurant and they're only doing deliveries and pickups, now they need to build some sort of digital presence. They don't know how to do it, so they hire an
Hmm.
agency. And so agencies saw explosive growth over COVID, like over 2020. I think the stat was like MarTech Daily was saying that agency market in terms of new logos grew by 23% in
Hmm.
2020 during COVID, which is massive. Freelancer market, there was like net new 1 million freelancers that started during COVID. So both of those markets just grew rapidly because there was this really pressing need for companies to go digital. And so we kind of just rode that wave and saw, a positive side effect because of it.
So one of the things I noticed is that you were able to you hit roughly the 10, 15K MRR level before you raise money. Is that right?
Yep.
Was it always your strategy to raise money through the venture capital path, or is that something you only like decided along the journey?
Yeah, something that we decided along the journey. I was initially thinking maybe this isn't a venture scale business. Like most businesses aren't, honestly. Like I think
Right.
VC is a really expensive model for most companies, and it really doesn't make sense. And maybe it's a contrarian view. I don't know, but like that was my thought process for a while. And then I was talking to one of our advisors, and he's like, you know how rare this is, like the opportunity that you guys have. He's like, you have traction in a market where there's no real industry leader. Like when you think of like marketing agencies or freelancers, like there probably isn't one product that comes to mind that really kind of
Right.
encapsulates and owns the space. And he's like, sure, like it's a small glimpse of success, but like, look, you guys are doing like 15K a month, you are profitable, you have really good footing, people love your product, and no one owns this market. He's like, if I were you, I would just go raise money and just run as fast as you can to kind of be the
Mhm.
thought leader for marketing agencies and build the platform for them. And so that was kind of the pivoting point for us where we're like, all right, like I think you're right. Like that's actually a really good point, and there's a big opportunity here. Where we're at, we're really fortunate that like capital is obtainable. Like it's
Mhm.
in Colorado here. Like there are a few different VC firms that are um, reputable and supporting local businesses. So yeah, we kind of made that decision. Like, all right, like if we're gonna do this, let's do this, and let's knowing that we're gonna get on the VC treadmill, and typically the only way you get off the treadmill is you go public or you get acquired, right? Like typically
Mhm.
most companies don't go and raise Series A, Series B, and then become profitable. Like it happens, but it's pretty rare.
Right.
So we like sat down, had a conversation for probably a couple hours, chatting through like, is this really what we want to do? Is the opportunity as big as we think it is? And ultimately decided that like, yeah, this is worth doing, worth pursuing.
Were you on board with the VC idea before you knew the numbers, or is it clear that after the seeing the numbers, like I would give up X% for Y dollars, and you was like, oh, that's a no-brainer, or was it more of a hesitation until you saw, or hesitation from throughout the whole thing?
Um, I wouldn't say like seeing the numbers definitely like made me feel one way or another.
Okay.
Yeah, it was more just kind of like the ethos of taking money from a venture capitalist.
Have you noticed your stress levels go up on average or down on average since taking the money?
Gone down for sure. Like
Okay.
having having the cushion there is so nice, and like being able to hire really talented employees that otherwise we couldn't afford that
Hmm.
make my life way easier. Like that's been just the best part about raising money. And I think one thing that's really important is like before we've taken money from any investor, we always have the conversation of like, are we aligned, right? Like, where do you see this business going? What do you think the product's going to become is like another big thing. And like, I'm kind of a product guy, so that's something I always focus on is, do we have the shared product vision, or like, are you going to give us money and then say, no, you need to go after enterprises, or no, you need to build this different product? Like, if that's the case, we're not interested in your money. And so we've always been like pretty blunt and straightforward about it. And I think that's really helped us because there's never been crossroads where we don't agree with our investors. Like every single board meeting, it's very straightforward. It's just like, yep, we all know what we're doing. We all know how we get there. It's just a matter of like, let's continue to execute and make sure that we're moving in the right direction.
And you talked about team members, and I think team members are definitely what like are the core one of the core like pillars of success behind startups. How do you find team members and how do you attract them to come to your companies? Because I think a common theme is everyone wants the best software engineers, but the best software engineers already all have jobs.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's honestly one of the reasons why we chose secondary markets to grow the business. So
Hmm.
previously, I was living in San Francisco and have been there for 6 years, but I knew trying to recruit tech talent from Facebook and Google and Twitter and Slack and every other company that's there would have been really hard, and like it would have cost a fortune if we wanted to get the top talent. And so the thought was, hey, let's have office in Boulder, and that's where our engineering team is based, and also our
Mhm.
marketing team, because we can find just as qualified tech talent, but there isn't as much competition. And so I think focusing on these secondary markets has been really helpful for us. I think also not being super rigid and thinking outside the box. So like, for example, our lead engineer right now, like he didn't go through a traditional 4 year university getting like a CS degree. Like he studied
Mhm.
biomolecular engineering at John Hopkins. I'm like, okay, this guy's really smart. He taught himself how to code at his previous job and like was working, coding and at his previous job. But like he's probably the type of person that would get overlooked by Amazon because Amazon's like, oh no, like the resume doesn't match up with our filter that we built. So no, we're not going to actually interview him. And so I think just like being a bit creative and like flexible with who you hire helps a lot.
It's interesting that you bring that up because I think so. I used to be an engineer over at Uber, and I think one of the better engineers I worked with was also a biomedical engineer graduate. I think is also from the same school,
Oh no way.
and he also went to self. Then he self-studied engineering. He learned all the like lead code like tricks and I don't know
Yeah.
tips, and then was able to like score a job there and like learned from just being on the job versus learning through the traditional school system.
Yeah, I mean, I think it honestly is more impressive in some ways if you can teach yourself how to
Definitely.
code. Like, I went through a 4 year university. I got a computer engineering degree, so I think I can confidently say that like I would not have been able to teach myself how to do this and like have the motivation to just spend nights and weekends trying to learn how to program. It's really impressive.
So did this person find you, or did you find them through a referral? How this connection happen?
Through AngelList. So
Okay.
yeah, we always just post our jobs on AngelList, and we've had a decent amount of success there because I think it's obviously skewed more towards startups.
Mhm.
We've published jobs on like LinkedIn and other job listing sites, and some of them are successful, but like we do get a lot of candidates that are coming from Oracle, for example. Oracle's a great company. Like a lot of the engineers there are great, but the skill set doesn't always translate over to a 3 person engineering team at a scrappy startup. Like, yeah, I think having the right mindset and finding someone that like really wants to work at a startup and wear a bunch of different hats and like is okay if something isn't fully polished, especially from an engineering side. Like you need to be okay with pushing out an MVP sometimes. And I think finding someone that like was working at a 10,000 person company, like it's really hard to get them over that hump and get them comfortable with that.
So how do you look for that skill set? Like obviously resumes only tell one side of the picture. Like what else do you do on top of that to find a good cultural fit?
Yeah, I mean it's really tough. So like our interview process, which has worked really well for us to date, is we always start with a phone screen. I usually do the phone screen, so it's super time consuming, but like
All of them?
most of them, yeah, it's
Okay.
very time consuming, but it's a good filter function. Like I spend
Yeah.
15 minutes on the phone with every new candidate, and that just kind of helps me filter out folks I just don't think are going to match the culture of the company well,
Hmm.
or how we operate and work. Anyone that makes it through that phone screen then goes into a culture interview. So we purposefully set up a culture interview. We tell them it's a culture interview too, and we say, look, this is a two-way street. Like, if you don't like the folks that you meet on the culture interview, like, don't proceed forward with the interview
Hmm.
process. And we also tell our team, like, hey, don't ask technical questions. Don't figure out like whether they're a good skill set fit. Your only goal is to see like, would you want to go hang out with this person? Would you want to go camping with this person for 3 days? It's kind of our barometer. And so that's like a very purpose interview, and like I think that's worked really well to like filter out bad culture fits or folks that maybe just wouldn't do well in this work environment.
And I'm guessing the team is small enough such that everyone's on the same page, that people generally agree on hires and they don't generally disagree.
It's a mixed bag, honestly.
Okay.
The way that we approach the culture interview specifically is if any one person says no, we don't move forward with the candidate. So
Okay.
it could be 3 people on the interview, two say, yeah, I enjoy the conversation a lot. The third person says, no, I don't like this one thing about them, or like, I don't think they're going to work well in this environment. It's an instant no, so we just don't move forward with them.
So how many candidates do you think you had to, or historically, how many candidates would you have to interview for you to be highly satisfied with one hire or to put out an offer?
Yeah, I think we usually start. I mean, it really depends on the role, and just kind of like the technical ability required because
Hmm.
obviously like the next round of interviews, the third round of interviews is kind of the skill set interview. For engineering, it's more technical, and so sure, like they might have made it through the first two rounds and they're a great culture fit, but technically they're not up to par of what
Hmm.
we need, and so they don't make it through. So for engineering, we try and have more candidates kind of at the top of the funnel.
I
So
see.
I'd say anywhere from like 10 to 20 candidates that make it past that first round for us to feel like, yeah, we're going to get at least one good candidate out of this at the end.
One of the things you mentioned earlier was having an advisor who would like guide you through this idea of, hey, do you want to raise money? It's not like you have to, but it's like a pretty good idea. How'd you meet this advisor, and like how regularly involved are they with the day-to-day operations?
Yeah, so we met him through an accelerator program that we did here in Boulder. That was honestly like the most valuable part of the accelerator was the connections
Hmm.
that we made through it. They had, I think in
What's the
like,
name of it?
it's called Boomtown.
Okay.
Yeah, so they have a program that's here in Boulder. I don't know if they're doing it this year, but they have one in Boulder, and then they also have one in Atlanta that's sponsored by Comcast.
I
Um,
see.
but yeah, so through the accelerator program, I think it was like week three, we did mentor matching, where they just brought in a bunch of mentors in the local community from all different backgrounds, skill set, um, you know, really diverse group of folks, and we had the opportunity to have like speed dating sessions with them, like
Hmm.
10 minutes with each mentor, and then you get a pick at the end of it. Okay, here's the three mentors I want to work with for the program. And so we actually brought two of our mentors on as advisors after the program ended and continue to work with them. We meet with them every 2 weeks, so pretty frequently. And yeah, it's just like a standing strategy session essentially of like, hey, here's all the things that we're working on right now. Here's where we're getting caught up. What do you think we should do about that? And like, if our broader strategies change, giving them an update on that, and like making sure it's still in line with you know what they think is the right approach.
And do you compensate them with all cash, cash plus equity, or just all equity?
All equity, yeah, so no
Okay.
cash. Yeah, I mean, if it's helpful for other folks that are listening that are kind of in a similar state and thinking about doing this, we did just standard options actually out of our employee option pool, and
Hmm.
then 3 year vesting with I think a 1 year cliff on it.
Okay. So pretty typical stuff.
Yeah.
How'd you learn all these like startup thingies? Because I think usually people hear about it from being in the industry for a long, long time. I imagine you have to learn a lot on the job while figuring out the product, while selling the product, and like, how do you fit in time to learn?
Yeah, I mean, podcasts go a long way,
Okay.
honestly. Like every morning when I shower or if I'm driving to work, I'll listen to a podcast. So if you think about it, it adds up pretty quickly. You can listen to a lot of different shows.
What
So
ones
it's
do
like,
you follow?
oh my gosh, a lot. So, I mean, How I Built This is one that I'm sure
Okay.
everyone listens to. Masters of Scale with Reid Hoffman. Um, All In is the new one I started listening to with like Jason Calacanis and Chamath. Um, I'm trying to remember what else. Like Indie Bites is a less popular one. That's pretty good. The Indie Hackers podcast, if you're
Hmm.
familiar with that community. Yeah,
Hmm.
just like a bunch of random like business entrepreneur podcasts that I listen to. So like that was a big part of it. And then I also brought on an advisor super early on. So within the first like month of starting the business, one of my good friends had been around the block a few times. He's I think like a decade older than me. So
Hmm.
started a few companies and had a few exits and knows the space really well. And so I just said like, hey, I would love for you to be a formal advisor. Like, tell me what I should pay you because I don't know, and tell me how to structure it. And so he was thankfully very honest and friendly and was
Hmm.
like, yeah, like here's how you should do it. Didn't take advantage of me. Thank you, Taz, for not doing that. And then like help structure all the deals moving forward from there.
Integrity is such a key thing in business, and I think a lot of people underrate how important integrity is. Like if I can't remember who said it, but it was something along the lines of, you don't want to work with some person for a lifetime, you shouldn't work with them for a day. And I think it's so true.
Yeah, yeah, and like honestly, the startup scene is it's small. Like
Yeah.
it feels big, but like you cross paths with the same folks like so many times, or at least I do. And yeah, you want to always leave every conversation on a positive note. You don't want to burn any bridges because you're going to see that person again, or they're tangentially connected. to someone else that you know that.
I kind of like it, to be honest, because I feel like it's a good network effect in the sense that it encourages a community of trust and a community of treating people well. Because I think high trust communities are relatively uncommon, and there's a lot of low trust communities where I feel like there's just less progress being made because everyone can't figure out whether they can trust people to do either like simple things as as a job or not without like cheating the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like when we're talking about VCs and raising money, like that whole system's built on trust, right? Like
Hmm.
VCs have two things. They have money and they have their reputation. That's like almost it. Like obviously they're
Hmm.
providing a lot more value than that, but
It's
founders,
mostly
it's
that.
mostly that. Like anytime you go to raise money from VC, you're gonna talk to other portfolio companies. You're gonna talk to other CEOs and say, "Hey, how's your experience been?" You're gonna do your homework. And if those CEOs go, "Oh man, it's been a terrible experience. I wish I didn't take their money," or whatever
Hmm.
else, like you're not going to take money from that VC. There's other
Right.
options, and so like it's so true that integrity is just such an important thing. It's such an important characteristic to have anytime you're um, you know, dealing with startups, no matter what side of the table you're on.
You mentioned that your parents are both entrepreneurial, right?
Yeah,
What did they teach you about entrepreneurship, or what did you learn from them as you were like growing up?
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I don't think we ever had like really concrete conversations around entrepreneurship. It's
Hmm.
just what they did, you know, like that's all that I ever knew is like they just ran their own companies. And yeah, I think like it inspired me just seeing, yeah, like this is totally obtainable, this is possible. Both my parents do it, and seeing that it gave them more flexibility, right? Like they're not running VC-backed software companies, like they're running small businesses, and it gives them a lot of flexibility because they can set their own hours, they can choose how
Hmm.
many jobs they take on, all that kind of stuff. And so I think that part of it was pretty appealing to me.
So would you say that as what you can see as a child and maybe even now that they had a pretty good, healthy work life balance?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would say that's definitely true, and it's definitely appealing, right? Like that's ultimately what everyone wants, or it's at least what I want is good work-life balance, and hopefully it's not always the case with the startup, right? Like a lot of times you're working way too many hours and way too many days per week. But I think the end goal is to build a really solid team around you that is very supportive and you can trust, and almost build build yourself out of the company in a lot of ways, right? Like if you're doing your job well as a CEO,
Hmm.
shouldn't need to be there for the company to run. Like you should be able to
Right.
take a 2 month vacation. Like everything just runs smoothly because you built the proper SOPs, you've hired the right people, and so I think that's kind of like the goal is getting to a point where um, I don't necessarily need to be involved in every decision. I don't need to be there every day.
How close do you feel like you are to that if you're already there with your current business?
We're getting there. We're not there yet. I think an important like next milestone for us. So we just raised Series A. We closed last Friday, so it's very recent.
Oh, huh! Congratulations.
Thanks. So I think the next milestone, though, for us between Series A and Series B is can we build out a leadership team of seasoned veterans that know what they're doing? They can kind of run with each of their organizations and pretty much give us updates, and we don't need to be involved in every decision, every meeting,
Hmm.
every stand up. And so, a couple of our departments, we've hired folks that are there and can do that. There's still a few more departments within the company that we need to find the right leaders to kind of take over that part of it.
You're roughly 4.5 years into your journey, right?
Yep.
Is there any things you've been learning this past year that you wish you knew from the very beginning?
Hmm. That's a really good question. What did I learn this past year that I wish I knew earlier? I don't know. It's so tough because like I'm pretty happy with how things have turned out so far, and
Hmm.
so like I wouldn't want to necessarily change anything. I mean, obviously, I wish I would have talked to customers earlier on and gotten feedback, and that's something I figured out within the first 2 years. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like I always come back to like raising money, right? Like it was a while before we raised money. Like
I see.
started the company in April 2017, raised money in August of 2019. So it was over 2 years. So
Hmm.
if you look at the journey of our company, yes, it's 4.5 years old, but like the first 2 years were like this. like very gradual growth, and then like the most like previous 2 years are just like sort of a hockey stick where we've had the capital and resources to just like pour fuel onto the fire and grow the business a lot quicker. So that's like one thing. It's like maybe I would have raised money sooner, knowing that like we're going to end up on this path anyway.
Hmm.
I was kind of holding out, saying like, well, I don't know if this is going to be a VC-backed startup. I don't know if we actually want to raise money. But ultimately, obviously, we decided that this is the path that we want to go down, and so we did raise money. And again, like those first 2 years were really hard, being bootstrapped with, initially $27,000 in the bank, and that's it.
So let's say we fast forward time and you have this very robust operating system for all of these marketing agencies to use, and every agency on the planet is using it. What's next in your journey?
Oh man, I mean, once the operating system's built, kind of the next step is solving this bigger problem for agencies and freelancers. Like if you talk to any agency owner and say, "What's your biggest problem?" almost all of them will say finding new clients, right? Like turnover is just super high in this market. And like it's really hard for agency owners to find clients. Most of them don't have really robust processes. A lot of them just get their clients from referral. They work with Bob's Burgers, and Bob's Burgers is friends with, whatever, like the ice cream shop next door, and the ice cream shop's like, hey, what do you use for social media? And I hire this agency, they're great. That's how they get their clients. It's not really scalable. And so I think if we can solve the operating system problem, the next step is like, how do we solve this problem of agencies finding new clients and continuing to grow? And I think if we could build a marketplace where brands can hire, cloud campaign vetted agencies through us, and agencies can host their portfolio on our website, in the marketplace, I think that could actually be a really interesting problem that we could solve.
Okay, now taking it back to reality, do you feel like that's a problem you want to tackle or will tackle within the next 2 years?
I don't think we'll tackle the marketplace in the next 2 years. Like we
Okay.
need to get critical mass first, right? Like this only works if we get enough agencies on our platform. Once we get enough agencies and they're hosting their portfolios through us, then we can start to think about, okay, like Cloud Campaign has the largest collection of vetted marketing agencies. That's
Hmm.
super valuable for a brand to then go figure out which agency to hire. Because that's also another really tough problem for brands is like it's all based off reputation and reviews. Like I don't really know if they're actually doing the work right. Versus like we have all the data because we're
Hmm.
billing programmatically from Facebook and the different platforms that they're advertising
I
on.
see.
We can see how they perform and benchmark against all of their competitors as an agency. And so kind of the short answer is it's going to take a few years, I think, for us to build up enough customers, enough agencies for it to be really valuable before we can start to work on that additional product.
So, what would you say is what like the core thing that motivates you to build all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it honestly comes back to thinking about my parents and like them being small business owners. Like it's never been it's never been easier to start a small business, like especially an online business at this point.
Hmm.
But I still think there's way too many barriers to entry. Like if you think about just all of the logistics of trying to start a marketing agency, trying to figure out like how am I going to bill my clients, right? Like once I find the clients, how do I bill them? How do I invoice them at the end of every month? What tools am I going to use to manage all their different campaigns across email and social and build their website and everything else? And so I think just trying to reduce that barrier. So anyone that wants to start an agency and has like that marketing background, that marketing skill set,
Hmm.
can put in their credit card and get started within 20 minutes. It's almost like Shopify, right? Like if you want to go start an e-commerce store, you go to Shopify, you
Right.
get your credit card within 20 minutes, you're selling your product online. Like we want to do the same thing for agencies where they can sell their services online, within 20 minutes and have all the tools and resources that they need to do that.
Okay. Do you have a do you have anything that ever keeps you up at night?
It's a long list. We'll be here all day, David.
Related to Cloud Campaign or not related to Cloud Campaign?
Mostly related to cloud campaign. Yeah, I mean, there's always things, right? Like you're always trying to think about how do I optimize the business? Like, are there competitors that are going to figure this out and try and move into our space? Um, is the market going to change, right? Like the thing about raising VC money is you need to get very large for this to make sense
Yeah.
for investors. Like if we sold for $20 million, like that's not going to be a good exit for our investors. Like it needs to be much, much more than that. And so
Right.
it only really works if if the market's big enough, if we're able to get in front of enough of the market, if there isn't a massive shift in the wrong direction. Like, fortunately, what we've seen from COVID is there are more freelancers starting up than ever before. There's more agencies that are starting up
Hmm.
than ever before. Like, that's great for us. Like, that's what we need to continue to see. But yeah, if we ever saw that kind of go in the opposite direction, like, that's something that's just completely out of our control and could get us to a point where, like, being a VC-backed company in this space doesn't make sense. Like, fortunately, we're not seeing that, and everything seems to be moving in the right direction. But I think the things that keep me up at night are the things that are just out of my control, and like I can't really do much about.
Do you employ any types of like meditation to help, like, I guess, emotionally archive a bunch of those fears and worries?
Sort of. Yeah, I mean, I was using like the Headway or
Hmm.
Headspace.
I think
Yeah,
it's Headspace. Yeah.
we use Headway for product updates. I always mix that up. I was using the Headspace app daily for a while there, and like that's super helpful. We also do team wellness events for the company. So actually Wednesday, was that yesterday? Yeah, yesterday we did like a team yoga and meditation session where we brought in an instructor and had them teach the company. So like small stuff like that, because I think if I'm experiencing it, I'm probably not the only one that's getting anxiety from being at an early stage startup, and so we
Hmm.
want to make sure our employees are well supported as well.
Well, definitely the financial weight's definitely on the C-suite for sure, and the co-founders.
It is.
How do you? How often do you do those?
We do them once a month, the team events.
Are you the one that plans them all?
I used to. So what's actually really fun is like seeing these little committees kind of form within the company now that the company's gotten larger. And so we have a fun committee now. I think it's, yeah, four of our employees kind of band together and like, hey, like, can we take over ownership for planning these events? I'm like, yes, please, that'd be great. And so yeah, they've taken over all that planning. So we do a team event the last Friday of every month where we'll just like go for a hike, or in the winter like
Hmm.
we'll go snowboarding, or um, go to Top Golf, like just do something outside of work with the team and get to know folks outside of like the normal work environment. And then we also do the team wellness event, um, like the middle Wednesday of every month, and we'll do like other stuff as a team too. So we'll do um, like a certification day where like the company will pay for all the employees to get certified in whatever they want. Hopefully something related to their career and not super random.
CPR for the whole team.
That could be helpful. Hopefully, it's not helpful, but it could be helpful for the company one day. But yeah, like just that type of stuff. Honestly, like just trying to encourage the team to like get to know each other outside of work and realize that there's more to more to the team than just like 9 to 5 sitting at your computer.
When did that tradition start? And was it your idea?
We started it super early on. Yeah, so like part of going through the accelerator, they make you go through these exercises of, what's your mission, what's your vision, what are your core values, and like it feels silly when it's just you and your co-founder and there's no one else there. You're
For sure.
like we don't have time for this. Like there's fires burning, and you're gonna have to like sit here and tell you like what our core values are. Like I don't know, but it was super helpful because like it built the foundation. And so like this was one thing that we decided on is like, hey, we want to do a team lunch every Wednesday. So every Wednesday we all go out, choose a different restaurant, and get food. We want to do team wellness events, and we want to do the team activities, the Friday activities. They actually started when COVID hit because we used to
Hmm.
be in person in the office, and then we stopped seeing each other. And we're like, hey, let's at least go once a month and go for like a socially distanced hike or do something so we can all be together and see each other in person.
Hmm. So it feels like you did draw a lot of value out of that accelerator program.
Yeah, I think it really built a strong foundation for us. It helped us build our mentor network and investor network as well. It's where most of
Hmm.
our early investors came from, and helped us kind of set the broader strategy of deciding to raise money and try and build this into a much larger company.
So how did you discover the accelerator program, and what would you say that you got out of it? Like, what was it? How long of a program was it?
It was 12 weeks. Yeah, we discovered it. So my co-founder Ross actually went to high school with one of the founders of the accelerator program,
Hmm.
and so that's how we heard about it. And then yeah, it was like this crazy story where we applied like 2 days before the program was supposed to start. They had a company that dropped out, so they're like, yeah, like we might be able to get you in, but the program literally starts on Monday, and like
Hmm.
you're in San Francisco, it's in Boulder. We're like, we'll make it work. Like I'm hopping on a flight on Saturday, I'll land Sunday. I'm gonna crash at a friend's place here in Boulder and sleep on the ground, and like we'll show up on Monday morning. We'll be there, and so like that's what happened. And then 2 weeks later, like drove back, when packed up all my stuff, got my dog, and then drove back out here and found a place to rent. But yeah, it was kind of like a quick spur of the moment thing, but I'm really glad we did it.
For people who aren't familiar with an accelerated program, can you walk through how those 3 months were spent?
Yeah, I think
Sorry,
every
4 months?
accelerator.
4 months? Okay.
I think it was three. Yeah, 12 weeks.
Okay.
It was like 3 months.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, every accelerator is pretty different. Like if you go to YC, there's like less structure and it's more focused around like founder dinners, and they bring in like different thought leaders that will have a speech during those dinners.
Hmm.
For us, it was pretty structured. So like initially, so like one, it was like 8 hour days every day, which is super hard while you're trying to run your business, because it's like you need to be there and focused, like listening to like the lectures. It's almost like school in a lot of ways, and you're at the same time like trying to respond to customer messages and like make sure the servers don't crash and do all these other things. It's like it's super stressful, but our program was like each week was dedicated to a different topic. So the first week was like uh, product discovery and customer interviews. The second week was legal, like setting up your startup and how to think about funding and hiring and issuing options, that type of stuff. Um, I don't remember what all the weeks were, but essentially like there were 12 weeks, and each week was some sort of different kind of topic. And then at the end, the culmination of it was a demo day where we got to get on stage and present. It was kind of like the end of Boulder Startup Week, so there were, I think it was like around 1,000 people in the audience, and like you had to present your startup to all these different like publishers and people in the community, investors. So it was a really cool event for us.
Hmm. Were you intimidated?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, of course. The last, honestly, like the last 2 weeks of the program were just focused on like meditation and managing anxiety
Hmm.
and speaking. Honestly, like just having a speech coach there to teach you how to convey your story in a more compelling way, and like if you get nervous, what should you do, and what are the different breathing exercises to calm back down so you're not just on stage like in shock in front of 1,000 people.
Hmm. So did they just force you to practice your pitch for like days on end?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they scheduled a bunch of like events with local friendly investors at like smaller venues that were maybe 30, 40 individuals, that would allow you to kind of ramp up to the point where now you're on kind of the main stage in front of hundreds, if not 1,000 people.
Is the goal of the demo day to like pair people who are trying to found projects and those who are trying to look to invest, or is it more so just get visibility out there for their products, or is it both?
Is more visibility.
Okay.
Yeah, because it might have changed with like kind of the new SEC guidelines around fundraising, but like at the time you couldn't solicit funding from someone that wasn't an accredited investor,
I see.
and there's just anyone in the audience, right? Like you don't know who's there, so like you couldn't actually ask for funding at that point.
Okay.
But the earlier events, like when we were actually practicing, was an opportunity to ask for funding, and that's actually where we found some of our early investors, was during some of those like practice pitch events, and they actually ended up investing in our angel round.
Hmm. So how well do you know those investors before you like were confident? Okay, I'm ready to take their money.
Not well. No, not
Okay.
well. We were pretty desperate at that time.
Okay.
Like when we raised our first tranche of funding, and it was only 175,000, like it wasn't much. We were just we were having a really tough time trying to convince people about the story. Like it wasn't really buttoned up. We didn't really know exactly how we're going to use the money. We just knew, like, hey, if we had another salesperson, like we could grow twice as fast. And they're like, yeah, like I get that, but like that doesn't mean you're VC eligible company. And we're like, yeah, we know that as well, but like we'll figure it out. Don't worry. And so that was really difficult. And because of it, yeah, we were just like, hey, like you have money, you want to give it to us, like you seem legit. I don't know, like this is gonna be a journey. We'll figure it out together. And so
Hmm.
we kind of just took whoever was willing to give us money. Like we got super lucky. I'm by no means trying to say we got bad investors. We actually got insanely lucky and have amazing investors. One of them actually just joined our board
Oh,
as an independent board director. So that just goes to show like how much we appreciate all of their feedback and really enjoy having them around us.
Cool. So I have one final question that I like to ask all of our guests. What is the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you?
It's the easiest question all day. So yeah, I'm on Twitter. My name is just underscore Ryan Bourne on Twitter. I also blog from time to time on Medium, just medium.com/Ryan Bourne. And then, yeah, if folks want to send me an email and want to collaborate on something, or if anyone's looking for a job, we're trying to hire really quickly at this point. You can reach me at rborn@cloudcampaign.io.